program directors, ministers who are here present, and deputy ministers who are also present here, MECs, and of course our Premier who spoke earlier, our MECs, our mayors, our councillors, and leaders of various organizations here in Northern Cape, religious organizations, leaders, community-based organizations and sports leaders, organizations, and ladies and gentlemen and fellow South Africans. Goeiemôre. Molweni. Sanbonani. Dumelang. Avshin. Ndimacheron. Dit is baie koud hier in Pofadder vandag. Today I greet all the women of South Africa as your president. Vandag groet ek al die vroue mense van Suid-Afrika as julle president. En ek groet al die mense ook as 'n seun wat uit 'n vrou mens gebore is, as 'n broer vir 'n suster en as 'n man van 'n baie mooi vrou. En ook ja, sê is baie mooi. En as 'n vrou van nee, as 'n vader van dogters. Ek het 2 dogters, baie mooi dogters ook. Julle kerels, julle moet nie nou baie dinge dink nie. On this day, I do indeed pay tribute to the women of South Africa. They are the true pillars of our communities, as die pilare van ons gemeenskap. They are the anchor of our families. They are the backbone of our nation. As we say, abafazi imbokodo. Today we stand on the shoulders of giants. Giants who are wise, caring, loving, and selfless women who raised us, who made us what we are, who nurtured us, and who also led our country to freedom. It is my real honor to be here in Pofadder. Dit is my eer om hier in Pofadder en Khaima plaaslike munisipaliteit te wees. Die Noord-Kaap is die geboorteplek van baie vrouhelde, heroes and heroines of our liberation struggle. People like Mama Francis Bart, people like Mita Siperepere, Tina Jumat Peterson, and many others. The Ramaphosa district is known for its very rich cultural history. It is a home of the Nama people, the very proud Nama people. This province is home of our living legend, Mama Katrina Esau, who is fighting to preserve the language and culture of the San people. And today we remember all the women of this province and from across South Africa who have played their important role in building our country. We salute their resilience and their dignity. Each year on Women's Day, we commemorate the historic march of more than 20,000 women who bravely marched to the Union buildings in Pretoria on the 9th of August 1956 to protest against the extension of past laws to women. And today, that is why we have this public holiday in commemoration and memory of those 20,000 women who came from all over South Africa. They were courageous, they were brave, and they were determined. And they stood in silence for 30 minutes once they had given their petitions to the then apartheid rulers. And I'm told that the Prime Minister of the time, on seeing that they were approaching, he got into his car and ran away. I will not run away. I have been involved in situations where women came to give a petition at the Union buildings. And I was there at 9 o'clock at night, and I received those petitions, and I did not run away. But the then Prime Minister ran away. He had weggehardloop, want hy was baie bang vir die voormense van ons land. Ons sê baie dankie vir al daardie 20,000 vroumense wat Union buildings toegegaan het in 1956. And it is these women who said, Watinta Bafazi, Watinti Mbogoto, Uzagufa. When you strike the women, you strike a rock and you will be crushed. Finish and clear. In the many years since then, and this song has come to represent women's courage in South Africa and their strength. I must say that whenever we have state visits, I tell this story every time we have Women's Day. Whenever we have state visits and when heads of state come to the Union buildings, there is a representation of two rocks, one at the bottom, one on top. And I always explain to them what happened on the 9th of August in 1956 at that very spot. And I tell them that the stone on the top is to grind. And this is the stone that did grind the apartheid system. And today we have our freedom because the women of our country also marched to the Union buildings on the 9th of August. So in many ways than one, we as South Africans, and especially we, the men in South Africa, must say thank you to the women of our country of 1956 who were brave, maybe even braver than us men, who marched against the might of the apartheid state. So we say thank you, thank you, thank you for all the vroumense van South Africa. So today, as we celebrate 30 years of freedom and democracy, we should take stock. We should reflect on how far we have come. We should be able to to talk about the challenges that stand in the way of the emancipation of the women of our country. To move forward, we must understand our past. South Africa remains a highly unequal country. Poverty still has the face of a black woman. When you want to understand poverty in South Africa, you just need to look at the face of a black woman, of a colored woman. Yes, those are the faces that you need to look at, and you will see poverty. Black women are more likely to be unemployed, to be poor, and to be unskilled. Cultural norms and practices, many of these the product of colonialism and apartheid, continue to hold our women back. Apartheid broke up families. Men were recruited as migrant laborers, leaving women and children behind to fend for themselves. Young girls were brought up for marriage. As they were growing up, they were seen as being young women who should just be married, even before they could get an education. They were confined to the home. Now, over 30 years, through the struggles of women, we have done much to improve the status and the circumstance of the women of South Africa. We have built on the struggles of many decades. This year marks 70 years since the historic Women's Charter was adopted. It is 30 years since the adoption of the Women's Charter for effective equality. These charters continue to guide our efforts, to inform what we should do to empower the women of our country and to address their challenges. As the Women's Charter demands, yes, we continue to find ways of ensuring that women are placed in a situation where they can exercise their rightful rights. They have the right, the women of our country today have the right to vote. They have the right to equal work for equal pay. They have the right to equality before the laws of our country. And these rights did not exist in the past. And we have made great progress in providing for the protection of mother and children. As the Women's Charter demands, we have worked to provide proper homes, yes, for many women in our country, but we still have to do much more. Many women in our country still do not have their homes, still do not have places where they can bring up their children. Many women in our country still live in shacks. They still live in tin houses. They still live in plastic houses. And this is what we must correct. And correct this we shall, because we must give dignity to the women of our country. We have to use the words of the Charter, worked to provide water, light, transport, sanitation, and other amenities of modern civilization. Women in South Africa enjoy rights and freedoms under our Constitution. They benefit from progressive legislation. Women today are significantly represented in Parliament, in government, and in the judiciary. It was a moment of great pride for me to sign a presidential order appointing the first female Chief Justice of our country. And in this regard, I must say that we have made history. We have made history, and it has been a moment of great pride to ensure that, yes, even the cabinet of the Republic has a balance between men and women. And I must confess that because we were setting up a government of national unity, where we had to bring in 10 political parties, I missed it just by one woman. But it is a cabinet that has a lot of women, and I am proud of that. Thanks to our affirmative action policies, there are today more women in important positions, even in various companies. Many women are becoming CEOs of big companies in South Africa, mining companies, commercial companies, manufacturing companies. The women of our country are surging forward. But more still needs to be done, especially in the private sector. Women in South Africa enjoy the right to quality health care. Yes, including reproductive health care. Millions of women in South Africa are supported every month with social grants to enable them to care for their families and to support their children. South Africa has one of the highest rates of women literacy in our region. There is parity between girls and boys in primary school enrollment. Ek vind dat baie van die jong mense wat skool toe gaan, baie van hulle is die meisiekinders en hulle is baie slim, slimmer as die manne. That's what I'm finding. And that maak my baie bly. Female learners achieve bachelor's passes. Yeah. Young women make up the majority of students in higher education institutions. As jy universiteit gaan, jy vind dat die vroumense is meer as die manne. And the young doctors van ons land, they do much better than the men. And that is something that we can be proud of. We have prioritized women and youth in our public employment programs. Around 66% of the participants of the presidential employment stimulus are women. Yet we still have much further to go. Now, as the government of national unity, we are united across the political spectrum by our common commitment to improve the lives of South African women. Now, what we did, we brought together 10 partye, and we said, let's work together, let ons almal werk, and let us put a government of national unity together. Now, this government of national unity is still growing, it's still developing. but we are united on the issue of empowering the women of our country. Each of the political parties has pledged that, yes, we will empower the women of our country so that we can grow our economy and accelerate development, so that women must take their rightful place as active participants in the economy. Ons wil hê die vroumense van ons land moet in die economy mooi, they must partake in the economy of the country in an active manner, in a way in which they will be able to get employment, to be business women, to be able to bring up their children, to ensure that there is economic progress in their own homes. And we want them to be producers, we want them to be employers, and we want them to succeed. This is what we have committed ourselves to. We want the women of South Africa to succeed. Now, to support this effort, we launched the Women's Economic Assembly. The Assembly aims to secure procurement opportunities for women-owned businesses in different industries, also in government, through the Women's Empowerment, Economic Empowerment Program. Approximately 8,000 women have been trained to establish and manage their own businesses. With funding from government and development finance institutions, we are increasing the support provided to women-owned enterprises. I did say that I would like 40% of government procurement to go to women-owned and controlled businesses. And that is what we are working on now. And we say this in real earnestness because it is the women of our country who bear the burden of supporting families. It is the women of our country who, when they earn money, either as employees or as business women, they first think of their families. Whereas men often think of other things. They think of other things. They think of cars. They think of yeah, they also think of going to a shebeen to go and drink the money. But when the women of our country earn a rand, they immediately think that they must buy food for their children. They must provide for their children. And that is why the women of our country are the real heroines of our nation, because they bring the nation up. We as South Africans today, we are what we are because of the women of South Africa. And we are grateful for that. So we are working to ensure that women must own land, especially in the rural areas. They must be able to own land, to be farmers, to produce food, the food that will feed this nation. This is so that they can farm and have assets that they can use to build and grow not only their own businesses, but the nation. We are driving initiatives to improve the health outcomes of the women of South Africa. This is part of our commitment as the chairperson of the Global Leaders Network for Women, Children, and Adolescent Health. As we celebrate the gains that have been made during 30 years of our freedom, our country is deeply traumatized by the violence that continues to be perpetrated against women and children. This violence is a betrayal of our Constitution. It is an affront to our common humanity. In recent years, we have worked together to fight gender-based violence and femicide. Guided by our National Strategic Plan, we have introduced new laws that protect survivors of gender-based violence, that improve the response of the police and ensure harsher sentences to perpetrators. We have opened additional sexual offenses courts, and I've been to some of these courts where I have seen how we are becoming more and more focused in addressing the plight of women in our country. We have expanded our network of the Tutuzela care centers, which are a haven of women who are running away from abusive husbands or partners. Centers that care for the women who are traumatized by violence that is perpetrated by men. We have introduced more victim-friendly services at police stations across the country, where there are still some weaknesses. In some police stations, we are monitoring and insisting that our police stations must have friendly centers where women can be properly interviewed and cared for in dignity. We have just recently passed legislation for the establishment of the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Council to mobilize and coordinate work across society. And I've said I would like this council to be established, to be constituted as quickly as possible. I know that there have been issues about the balance that there should be, that the women should be in the majority, and the legislation has not quite enabled that to happen. But I'm saying we will amend the legislation. We will make sure that, yes, the women of our country are in the majority on that council. But I want that council to be appointed immediately so that it can do the work that we want it to do as we amend the legislation. So I'm going to be urging our women organizations to move with speed so that we can appoint this council. Now, our Human Resources Research Council has completed the first ever national survey on gender-based violence prevalence in South Africa. The results of this groundbreaking survey are going to help guide our response to gender-based violence in our country. The study was undertaken in 2022 based on a random sample of many people who were interviewed at home. It measured issues such as physical, sexual, emotional, and economic abuse, as well as controlling behavior between intimate partners. Now, the detailed results of the survey will be released by Minister Chikunga in the coming weeks. Among other things, the survey found that around 7% of women that are aged between 18 and older had experienced physical and sexual violence in the past 12 months. Now, this rate was highest among young women, black women, women who completed secondary education, and women who are unmarried but live with a partner. 7% may sound like a lot, that it may not sound like a lot, but this figure is equivalent to 1.5 million women who are abused and violated. So according to the survey, over the course of just 1 year, more than 1.5 million women experience physical or sexual violence in our country. Now, this is not acceptable. This is more than the entire population of the Northern Cape. Imagine if the Northern Cape was only populated by women. This survey says all the women in the Northern Cape will have experienced violence or would have been sexually violated. This is not a statistic that we want, because these are human beings. These are people like all of us. These are women who have endured trauma that no person should have to experience. No woman in South Africa should be subjected to violence or to sexual harassment or to sexual violation at the hand of another person or a man. This should not happen. The survey highlights that physical violence starts early, often affecting adolescent girls and young women, and continues throughout adulthood. Around 13% of women who had ever been in an intimate relationship reported that they had experienced economic abuse at the hands of their partner. This is why we need to address the massive inequality in income between men and women. And that is why we say men and women who do the same work must get paid the same amount of money. We should not have a situation where men, and this happens in companies and other institutions, where men are seen as people who should earn more than women. What is so much more important for a man to earn more than a woman? Nothing. We are all empowered with the same brain power, and maybe women have better brain power than men. And so we must earn the same. On average, women earn a quarter of their income from grants compared to a far lower percentage for men. We must therefore create more jobs and more economic opportunities for women so that they are less vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. Significantly, 4% of men in the survey reported having perpetrated violence against a woman in the preceding 12 months. This translates to over 600,000 men who perpetrate violence against women. This makes clear what we all know. Men must change their behavior. Men must change their attitudes. During the election campaign, I used to go around the country and say to men, zip up, pull your zip up. And I would demonstrate and I would say, I said, pull your zip up. And yes, it was the women of our country who applauded more. But I want the men to applaud more when I say zip up. You must not go with your zip just hanging down. You need to zip it up and not go about violating the rights of women and raping women. And I've said, my broers, as jy liefde wil hê, jy moet mooi praat. Jy moet mooi vry. As jy mooi praat, ja, ons vroumense sal jou bietjie help. Now, I even said, ek dink ek moet nou, I must go and start a school. A school waar ek kan 'n paar manne leer om te vry. Ja, ek dink ek moet so doen. Want jy moet 'n man wat mooi kan vry, so that you can zip up. That is why today we call on all South African men to make a pledge. Now this is important. We call on all South African men to make a pledge and to be part of the solution, to take responsibility for their actions as men. And this pledge, so you know, was initiated by young boys at a school. These young boys initiated a pledge system, and they, as young boys, had become aware of the violence that is perpetrated against women in our country. And as young boys, they said they want to make a pledge. And they said in their pledge, they will never raise a hand against a woman. They pledged that they will treat women as equals. They pledged that they will respect the rights of women and treat them with dignity. We must now end gender-based violence, and we must work together as a society. We must work together, both men and women, both young and old, to end gender-based violence and femicide in our country. We cannot continue to be known as a country where women continue to be raped, to be killed, and to be violated. This must come to an end in South Africa, and the men of this country must make a stand and say, this we are going to stop. We will not be violating the women of our country anymore. Fellow South Africans, when we call South African women imbokodo, when we call them the rock, we use the term they chose to describe themselves. The face of poverty in South Africa may be that of a woman, but it is also the face of resilience. It is the face of determination. It is the face of achievement. The current generation of Imbokodo have been clear, and they have said there must be nothing that is done about women without their participation. They say nothing about us without us. And we must respect that. The blood and the sweat and the tears of South African women secured our freedom. And it is their labor, their toil, and their sacrifice that continues to build this nation. They are fighting not just for themselves. They are fighting for the dignity, the rights, and the well-being of all of us. As our mothers, as our grandmothers, as our great-grandmothers, our aunts, our sisters, our daughters, you are our heroes. We offer you our tribute and we offer you our gratitude. And we thank you as the women of our country for all you are doing to build our nation. Now we will continue to empower the women of our country. This government, and indeed the government of national unity, is going to continue to make all efforts at all times to make sure that we prioritize the empowerment of women. And we will continue to do so. That has not always been done in this country in the past, before 1994. Since 1994, we've been on a journey. We've been on a march to make sure that the women of our country are placed in a position where they feel empowered. Much still needs to be done. Yes, we need to deal still with inequality. There is still quite a lot of inequality. There's still quite a lot of discrimination against the rights of women. But we are determined as a government to make sure that we put the rights of women on the radar screen of our government and on the radar screen of the nation. To you women of South Africa, I want to end by saying your situation will continue to be improved. You have the determination of myself as president. You have the determination of the government of national unity. You have the determination of many men in our nation to ensure that you are empowered and your rights are upheld. So I wish all the women of South Africa a blessed Women's Day. And I want to thank you for being the women that you are and the mothers of our nation. Thank you very much.
Halala President Ramaphosa, halala.